My name is Emily, and you're listening to Daily English Talk, a place where we practice calm, natural English together. And today I want to talk with you about spending time in nature, about slowing down, stepping outside, and reconnecting with something very simple, very real, and very human that many of us quietly miss in our everyday lives. This topic feels especially important to me because spending time in nature slowly changed the way I live, the way I think, and even the way I treat myself, and it wasn't a big dramatic change. It was quiet, gentle, and gradual, almost unnoticeable at first, but very powerful over time. As you listen to this episode, I want you to imagine that there is no rush, no pressure, no goal to reach. You don't need to catch every word, you don't need to repeat anything out loud. Just let the English flow naturally, the same way a walk flows without a destination, because this episode is not about performance, it's about presence. For a long time, I believed that being busy meant being productive, and being productive meant being valuable. So my days were full of plans, tasks, screens, and constant movement. And even when I stopped physically, my mind never really stopped. It was always thinking about what was next. I didn't realize how tired I was because tiredness became normal. It became my background state. And when stress becomes normal, you stop questioning it. You just accept it as part of life. And that's something many people experience without even noticing. At some point, though, something inside me started asking for quiet, not loudly, not urgently, just softly. And I found myself wanting to be outside more, wanting fresh air, wanting space, and that was the beginning of my reconnection with nature. When we talk about spending time in nature in English, we usually don't use complicated language. We use very simple verbs like walk, sit, breathe, look, listen. And at first, these words may seem too basic to express something meaningful, but in reality, they describe experiences that go deeper than many complex ideas. I live in a city, so nature for me doesn't always mean forests, mountains, or wide open landscapes. Sometimes it's a small park, a line of trees, a river, or even a quiet street where I can see the sky and feel the air on my face. And that's something important to remember. Nature doesn't have to be far away to be real. This year, I slowly started going for short walks more often. Not fast walks, not exercise walks, just slow walks without a goal, without music, without podcasts, without my phone in my hand. And at first, those walks felt strange, even uncomfortable. I wasn't used to silence, I wasn't used to hearing my own thoughts clearly, and I wasn't used to doing something without a purpose. And that discomfort taught me something important about myself. It showed me how rarely I allowed myself to simply exist. In English, when we talk about changes like this, we often say, I started to, I began to, or I got into the habit of. And these phrases are very useful when you want to describe a slow, natural shift in your life. For example, I got into the habit of taking quiet walks, and suddenly, that one sentence holds a whole experience. During those walks, I noticed how my body reacted. My breathing became slower, my shoulders dropped, my jaw relaxed, and these physical changes showed me how much tension I usually carried without realizing it. And awareness like that is powerful, because awareness is the first step toward balance. You might describe this feeling in English by saying, I feel calmer, I feel more relaxed, or I feel more at ease. And these sentences are very common and very natural when people talk about being outside and connecting with nature. As time passed, I started noticing small details that I had ignored for years. The sound of birds in the morning, the way leaves move in the wind, the color of the sky changing during the day, and noticing these small things made my days feel fuller, even when nothing special happened. You don't need advanced vocabulary to talk about nature or these moments. Simple adjectives like quiet, peaceful, fresh, open, or alive are enough, because they communicate feeling, and feeling is what makes language meaningful. Sometimes I would sit on a bench and do nothing at all. No scrolling, no planning, no thinking about the future, just sitting and being present. And in the past, that would have made me feel guilty, like I was wasting time. But this year, I learned that rest is not empty. Rest is necessary. In English, we often express realizations like this with phrases such as, I realized that, or I learned that, and you might say, I realized that slowing down helps my mind, or I learned that quiet moments are important. And these sentences are simple, honest, and very natural. Spending time in nature also helped me understand stress differently. Stress used to feel constant, like background noise that never turned off, but when I spend time outside, even for a short time, that noise becomes quieter. And I remember that not everything is urgent. Not everything needs my attention right now. You might relate to this experience, and you can talk about it in English by saying, nature helps me clear my mind, or I feel less stressed when I'm outside. And these are expressions native speakers use every day. Another thing nature gave me was perspective. When you see trees that have been growing for many years, or when you look at the sky that feels endless, your problems don't disappear, but they feel smaller, more manageable, and that shift in perspective can change the way you think and feel. In English, you can express this by saying, it puts things into perspective, or it helps me see things differently. And these phrases are very useful when talking about reflection and emotional change. As I spent more time in nature, I also noticed how disconnected I had become from my body, from physical sensations, and walking, breathing, feeling the ground under my feet slowly brought me back into the present moment. This feeling of presence is difficult to explain, but easy to recognize. And when you try to talk about it in English, you don't need perfect words. You can simply say, I feel more connected, or I feel grounded, and people will understand exactly what you mean. Nature didn't fix everything in my life. It didn't remove all stress or solve all problems, but it gave me space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to feel, and sometimes space is exactly what we need before we can move forward. As this first part comes to a natural and calm pause, I want you to take a moment and think about your own relationship with nature, even if it's small, even if it's just a memory or a feeling, because in the next part, we'll continue this conversation, going deeper into emotions, habits, and how spending time in nature can change not only how we live, but also how we express ourselves in English. As we continue this conversation, I want to move a little deeper, not into something complicated, but into something honest, because spending time in nature doesn't just change how our days look, it changes how our inner world feels. And that inner change is often the most important one. The more time I spent outside this year, the more I noticed how much I had been living inside my head, always thinking, planning, analyzing, and not enough inside my body, not enough in the present moment, and nature has a gentle way of bringing us back without forcing anything. There were days when I felt emotionally heavy without knowing why. Nothing bad had happened, but I felt tired, overwhelmed, or disconnected. And on those days, I learned that going outside, even for 10 minutes, could shift something inside me. In English, you can talk about these moments by saying, I felt overwhelmed, or I felt emotionally tired, and then you can add, spending time in nature helped. And that simple structure allows you to express something very real and very human. One thing nature taught me this year was patience, because nature never rushes. Trees grow slowly, seasons change in their own time, and when you spend time outside, you start adjusting to that rhythm without even trying. I noticed that after regular walks, I became more patient with people, more patient with myself, and less frustrated when things didn't happen immediately. And patience is not something I ever planned to learn, but it came naturally through presence. When you talk about this in English, you might say, I became more patient, or I learned to slow down. And these sentences show our inner growth, not just activity. Nature also changed the way I experienced loneliness in the past. Being alone often felt uncomfortable, like something was missing, but being alone outside felt different. It felt peaceful, connected, and complete. This is something many people find surprising, and in English, you can express it by saying, I feel comfortable being alone in nature, or being outside helps me enjoy my own company. And these sentences sound very natural and thoughtful. There were moments when I would walk and let my thoughts come and go without judging them. I didn't try to solve everything. I didn't try to be positive. I just allowed myself to feel whatever I was feeling. And that acceptance was very healing. In English, this might sound like, I allowed myself to feel, or I stopped judging my thoughts. And these expressions are gentle and honest, just like the experience itself. Spending time in nature also changed how I sleep, how I breathe, and even how I speak. My voice became calmer, my pace slower, and I noticed that when I felt grounded, my English flowed more naturally too, because language follows emotion. This is something I want you to remember as an English learner. When you feel relaxed, your words come more easily, you don't translate as much, you don't panic about mistakes, and nature can help create that relaxed state. Another beautiful thing about nature is that it gives us space to reflect without pressure. There is no expectation to be productive, no one watching, no goal to achieve. And in that space, clarity often appears on its own. I had many small realizations during my walks, not big life decisions, but quiet understandings like what really matters to me, what I want to protect in my life, and what I'm ready to let go of. In English, you might talk about this by saying, I reflected on my life, or I gained clarity, or I started understanding myself better. And these phrases are very common when people talk about personal growth. Nature also reminded me that change is natural, seasons end, leaves fall, things rest, and then they begin again. And seeing this cycle helped me be kinder to myself during periods when I felt slow, tired, or unmotivated. You can express this idea in English by saying, I accepted change, or I learned that rest is part of growth. And these sentences carry a lot of wisdom in very simple language. As this year went on, I noticed that spending time in nature became something I looked forward to, not something I forced myself to do. And that's how you know a habit is healthy, when it feels supportive, not demanding. I also started talking about nature more in my everyday English conversations, saying things like, I went for a walk to clear my head, or I needed some fresh air. And these are very natural phrases that native speakers use all the time. If you're practicing English, I encourage you to use these expressions because they are simple, flexible, and connected to real life, not textbooks. Spending time in nature also made me more grateful. Grateful for my body, for my ability to walk, breathe, and see. And gratitude has a way of softening our inner world. In English, gratitude often sounds like, I'm grateful for, or I really appreciate. And adding these phrases to your reflection makes your English warmer and more human. As we come toward the end of this episode, I want you to remember that spending time in nature doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be perfect, beautiful, or long. It just has to be real and accessible to you. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's sitting by a window, maybe it's standing outside for a few minutes and breathing deeply. Whatever it is, it counts, and it matters. If you want to practice English after listening, try describing one small nature moment in your day. Even one sentence is enough. Something like, today, I spent a few minutes outside, and it made me feel calmer. And that is already meaningful practice. Thank you for spending this time with me, for slowing down, for listening, and for learning through real-life experiences. It truly means a lot that daily English talk is part of your day. If you enjoy calm, natural English conversations like this and want to continue practicing English in a relaxed, meaningful way, don't forget to subscribe to Daily English Talk. It helps the channel grow and allows me to keep creating episodes like this for you. Take care, stay connected to yourself and to nature, and I'll see you in the next episode.